For 19 years I have sold charcoal portraits at the edge of the lantern court, and in all that time I have learned that there are two kinds of stillness in the world. There is the stillness of a thing that has stopped, and there is the stillness of a thing that is holding. A dropped stone is the first kind. A drawn bow is the second. The men of the Marinstead household guard are the second kind, and I have spent the better part of my life trying to put that onto paper, and failing, and trying again the next morning. I should tell you who I am, so you will know the worth of what I saw. I am no soldier. I never wore a uniform heavier than the apron I tie over my coat against the charcoal dust. I am an old man with a folding stool and a board across my knees, and I make my bread drawing the faces of people who will never see this city again. Tourists, mostly. And now and then a bride who wants her likeness taken with the gates behind her. I set up before the sun is properly over the rooftops, in the same square of cobblestone I have used since my hair was still dark, and from that spot I can see the whole of the lantern court. The long iron railings, the gravel sweep, the 2 sentry boxes painted the deep green of the house of Marinstead, and the gate they call the Saint's Gate, where St. Calder's palace lifts its gray shoulders against the sky. And I can see the guard. There is always a guard at the Saint's Gate, on the right-hand side as you face the palace, standing on a low stone where the cobbles have been worn pale by 100 years of polished boots. He wears the long dark coat and the tall black cap and the white gloves, and he carries a rifle he is permitted to use and almost never does, and he does not move. That is the whole of it. He does not move. The tourists test him the way children test the edge of a pond. They lean close to his face. They make jokes about his mother. They wave their hands and pull their grimaces and snap their little pictures, and he looks through them all at something past the far wall that none of them can see. And after a while they grow bored and go away, having proven nothing except that he is better at being still than they are at being loud. I have drawn that face more times than I can count. I never get it right. People think a still face is an easy face, the way they think an empty room is an easy room, but there is everything in it. There is a whole man behind the eyes, breathing slow, thinking his thoughts, and the trick of him, the thing I could never quite catch with my charcoal, is that the stillness is not absence. It is the most enormous presence I have ever stood near. It is a man with all his weight gathered up and held. The morning I am going to tell you about was Founding Day, which is the largest day in the calendar of our small kingdom, the day we remember the long-ago oath that first raised these walls. On Founding Day, the whole city comes to the Lantern Court, and a good part of the country besides. They come with their children on their shoulders and their flags rolled under their arms, and by mid-morning the square is so full that a man cannot turn around without asking his neighbor's permission. There is a parade. There is music, the deep brass of the regimental band, and the high silver of the fifes, and there are horses, and the carriages of the house. And at the very end, when the sun is high, the king himself rides the length of the court to the cheering of more people than live in 3 of our towns put together. I did not draw much that morning. There was no room for a stool and a board, and besides, on Founding Day people do not want their portraits taken. They want to be in the day, not beside it. So I folded my stool and put my board under my arm and let the crowd carry me where it would, and I found myself, by the working of luck that I have since had a great deal of time to think about, pressed up against the iron railing not 10 feet from the sentry box on the right of the Saint's Gate. 10 feet from the guard. He was a young man. I want to be careful about that because of everything that came after. He was not old and grizzled and full of obvious sorrows. He was young, perhaps 26, with a clean jaw and a steadiness about the mouth. And he stood on his worn stone with his rifle at his shoulder, and his eyes forward and the great roar of the day breaking over him like surf over a rock that has decided it will be a rock today and tomorrow, and for as long as the sea cares to argue. I had drawn him before. I knew his face the way you know a face you have studied without ever once speaking to its owner. I did not know his name. I learned it later. For most of what I am telling you I did not know it, and I will hold it back until the place where I learned it so that you can come to it the way I did. The crowd thickened as the morning wore on. That is the thing the songs never tell you about a great day, that a crowd is a living animal, and a living animal can be gentle or it can be frightened, and a frightened crowd is one of the most dangerous things on God's earth. It does not mean to be. There is no malice in it. It is only that 10,000 people, each of them perfectly kind on their own, become a single body with 10,000 legs and no head. And when that body decides to move, there is nothing the legs can do but go. What set it moving that morning was a small and stupid thing, the way the worst things usually are. There was an official. I never learned his proper title, and I am not sure it would mean anything to you if I had, but he was a man of the inner court, an undersecretary of some office or other, and he had decided that he and his party should view the parade from a particular place along the railing. The place where I was standing, as it happened, and a good 30 feet of crowd to either side. He had 4 or 5 men with him, large men in dark coats, and he sent them ahead of him to make a path. And they made it the way such men always make a path, which is to say with their shoulders and their forearms and a flat, unhurried contempt for everyone in the way. I felt it before I understood it. A pressure from my left, a leaning, as though the whole crowd had drawn a breath and held it. People stumbled into me. I stumbled into the man on my right. He stumbled into the railing. A woman cried out, not in fear yet, only in surprise. The undersecretary's men pushed, and the crowd had nowhere to go, because the railing was on one side and the press of bodies on the other, and so the push did what a push always does in a packed square. It traveled. It ran through the crowd like a wave runs through a rope when you snap one end, and it gathered force as it went. And somewhere down the line it found the people who could not hold their ground, and they went over. And in front of me, where the wave broke hardest against the railing, there was a child. I had not seen him before that moment, and I have wondered since how I could have missed him, for once I had seen him I could see nothing else. He was a small boy, 6 years old perhaps, in a little blue coat with a hood, and he had been holding the hand of an old man, his grandfather, I would learn, a thin stooped man with a white mustache and a flat cap, the sort of grandfather who saves all year to bring a boy to the capital on founding day. They had been together. And then the wave came, and the crowd surged toward the railing, and the old man's hand was torn out of the boy's hand the way a current tears a leaf off a branch, and the boy was carried 3 steps, 4 steps into the crush, and the old man was carried the other way, calling a name I could not hear over the band. The boy was small enough to disappear. That is the thing about a crowd crush that the people standing in it do not understand until it is too late. The danger is not above, where the noise is. The danger is below, where the children are, and the small, and the fallen in the dark forest of legs where no one can see and no one can help, and the pressure comes from every side at once. The boy was down there. I saw the top of his hood for one instant, bobbing, and then I did not see it, and a sound came out of me that was not a word, only an old man's useless cry, and I reached over the heads of the people in front of me as though I could pluck him out with my charcoal-stained hand, and of course I could not. There were 4 people between me and him, and they were packed as tight as bricks in a wall. The grandfather was screaming now. I could hear it under the band, a high, ragged sound, the name over and over, and the band did not stop, because the band could not see, and the parade did not stop, because the parade did not know, and the great glad animal of the crowd went on pressing toward the railing to see the carriages that were coming up the far end of the court. And at the bottom of all that gladness, a small boy in a blue coat was being crushed, and no one in all that multitude could do the one thing that needed doing. No one except the man who was not permitted to do anything at all. I want you to understand the position the guard was in, because if you do not understand it, you will think what he did was easy, and it was the furthest thing in this world from easy. He stood 10 feet from the boy. He could see, from his height on the stone, what none of us at ground level could see. I am certain of it, because I watched his eyes, and his eyes had found the boy. He was a soldier of the household on the highest ceremonial day of the year, in front of the whole nation, with the king himself a few hundred yards away and coming closer. And he had taken an oath, and the oath said that he would hold his post. Not that he would hold it unless something happened, that he would hold it. The whole meaning of the man, the whole worth of that dark coat and that tall cap and those white gloves, the thing the tourists came to gawk at and the thing the children were lifted up to see, was that he would not move. A guard who moves when he likes is not a guard. He is only a man in a costume. The stillness was not decoration. It was the promise. It was the entire promise. And the boy was going under. I have tried in the years since to draw the next part, and I cannot. I have ruined a great deal of paper trying. The trouble is that there was no single moment to draw. There was no flash, no leap, no flinging aside of the rifle. People who were not there imagine it that way, and I understand why. It is how such things go in the stories. But I was there, and what I saw was smaller and far stranger and far greater than that. What I saw was a man decide. I saw his eyes, which had been forward, come down, just that at first. The face did not change. The body did not change. The rifle did not move. But the eyes came down out of the far distance and landed on the boy, and in them I was close enough, I swear to you I was close enough to see it. In them something turned over. It was not panic. A man who panics is a man with no plan, and there was a plan in that face. I have seen enough faces over my board to know the difference between a man who is frightened and a man who is choosing. He was choosing. He was weighing the oath against the boy, the promise against the child, the thing he had sworn against the thing in front of him, and I watched him weigh it, and I watched him decide, and it took perhaps 2 seconds, and it was the longest 2 seconds I have ever lived through. Then he came off the stone. He did not throw the rifle down. I noticed that even at the time, and it has stayed with me. He brought it down off his shoulder in one clean, controlled motion, and he held it across his body, not as a weapon but as a barrier, a length of iron and wood to push a crowd with, and he stepped off the worn, pale stone where 100 years of guards had stood, and he went into the crush. A guard is a big man made bigger by his coat and his cap, and when one of them moves toward you, you move. That is bred into the bone of every person in this kingdom. The crowd parted in front of him, the way the sea is supposed to have parted in the old story, not all at once, but giving, leaning back, opening a narrow lane through the packed bodies, because the part of us that pushes blindly is not as deep as the part of us that knows what a guard is and gets out of his way. He used the rifle held crosswise to widen the lane, firm and even, never striking, only pressing, the way you would move a gate, and he said something. I could not hear it over the band, but I saw his mouth, and it was not a shout. It was a command, low and level and absolutely certain. The kind of voice that a frightened animal of a crowd obeys before it knows it is obeying. And he reached the place where the boy had gone down, and he bent, and he came up with the child in his arms. The boy was limp. I will not soften that, because the softening would be a kind of lie, and this is a thing that should be told straight. The little blue hood had fallen back, and the small face was the wrong color, a gray blue I had seen once before in my life, long ago, on a face I had loved. And the boy was not crying and not struggling and not doing any of the things a frightened child does. He had gone past frightened. The crush and the terror had closed his throat, the way terror will, and his lungs were locked, and he hung in the guard's arms like a doll a child has dropped. And here is where I learned that I had been wrong about the man for 19 years, not wrong about his stillness, but wrong about what was inside it. I had thought the stillness was the whole of him. I had thought a household guard was a man trained to be a statue and nothing more, and that under the statue there was just an ordinary fellow waiting for his shift to end. I was wrong. Under that statue there was a man who knew exactly what to do with a child who could not breathe, and who did it without one wasted motion, in the middle of 10,000 people, as calmly as if the two of them had been alone in a quiet room. He went down on one knee, there on the cobbles, with the boy across his other knee. He turned the small head with one white-gloved hand, gently tilting it to open the throat. He put his fingers to the boy's neck and held them there, reading something. His face had changed now. The ceremonial mask was gone, and what was under it was worse and better than I had imagined. It was the face of a man at work at the very edge of what can be done, focused down to a single point, with no room in it for the crowd or the king or the oath or anything at all except the small gray-blue face in front of him. He spoke to the boy. I was close now. I had fought my way along the railing without knowing I was doing it, and I heard him. "Easy," he said. "Easy now, I have you. You are not lost. Look at me. There you are, breathe with me, small breath, there. There it is." He had laid one broad hand flat on the boy's chest, and he was breathing himself, slowly, exaggeratedly, in and out, so the child would have a thing to copy, and he kept his eyes locked on the boy's eyes, and I understood that he was not only doing the work of clearing a frightened child's locked throat. I have learned since that there is a craft to it, a thing the field men know. He was also doing the older and simpler work of being the one calm thing in a world that had become all terror. He was lending the boy his own steadiness, the way you lend a drowning man your arm. All those years of holding, all that gathered weight I had tried so hard to draw, and here at last was what it was for. It was for this. It had always been for this. The boy breathed. It came out of him in a long, shuddering whoop, the most beautiful, ugly sound I have ever heard. And then another, and the gray went out of the small face and the color came back, blotchy and furious and alive. And the boy began to cry, really cry, great heaving sobs, the most ordinary sound in the world and the most precious. And the guard gathered him up against the dark coat and held him, on one knee on the cobbles, and bowed his head over the boy's head. And for one moment, in the middle of the largest day in the kingdom, the two of them were perfectly still. That, I have learned, is the part no charcoal can do, the motion I could draw if I had to. It is the stillness at the center of the motion that I cannot. The parade had stopped. I had not noticed when. The band had faltered and trailed off in that way a band does when one player after another loses the thread, and the horses up the court had been reined in, and the long line of the procession had simply ceased, because word travels through a crowd faster than any messenger, and the word that had traveled was that a guard had come off his post, and that could mean only one of two things, a catastrophe or a wonder, and the whole court had gone quiet to find out which. 10,000 people silent. I have heard the court roar on Founding Day every year of my working life, and I had never once heard it go silent, and the silence was bigger than the roar had been. In the silence, you could hear the boy crying. Then the guards came. 2 more of them from the Saints' Gate, moving fast and disciplined through the lane the crowd had opened, and at their head a man with the silver on his collar that marks an officer, the captain of the gate that day. I would learn his name too, Captain Holloway, a broad, gray-templed man who had the look of someone who had seen a great deal and been surprised by very little. I confess my heart went into my throat for the young guard then. I thought of the oath. I thought of the promise he had broken in front of the whole nation. I thought that whatever the man had just done, the army is the army, and a guard who leaves his post leaves his post, and I had a sudden cold vision of the young man marched away in disgrace, while the crowd that had been silent for a wonder turned its silence into something uglier. The captain reached them. He stood over the kneeling guard and the crying boy, and he looked down, and the whole court held its breath to see what he would do. He took off his cap. He took off his cap, the captain did, and he bowed his head just for a moment, the way a man bows his head in a church. And then he put the cap back on and he knelt down beside the young guard, knelt in his officer's coat on the public cobbles. And he put one hand on the young man's shoulder, and he said something I was too far to hear, and the young guard nodded, and I saw the line of his back, which had been so straight, let go just a little. The way a man's back lets go when a weight he did not know he was carrying is finally shared. And then there was the grandfather. He had got through somehow. An old thin man has a way of getting through a crowd that a large man never learns. And he came stumbling into the open space, and he saw the boy, and he made a sound I will not try to write down. and the guard rose up off his knee with the child still in his arms, and he carried him the 3 steps to the old man, and he put the boy into the grandfather's arms with a care I can only call tender, both white gloves cradling the small head until the old hands had taken the weight. And the old man clutched the boy and sank down right there onto the cobbles holding him, rocking, and the boy clung to his grandfather's neck. And the guard stood over the 2 of them with his bare head, for his tall cap had come off somewhere in the crush and someone had handed it back and he held it now in one hand. And he stood there like a man at a graveside, except that no one had died. No one had died. The whole point of it was that no one had died. I was weeping. I am not ashamed to tell you. I am an old man and I have buried people I loved, and I do not weep easily anymore. The well runs dry as you get on, but I wept then, standing at the railing with my drawing board forgotten under my arm, and I was not the only one. The silence of the court had broken, not into a roar but into something else, a low sound. 10,000 people letting out a held breath at once, and here and there a sob, and someone began to clap and the clapping spread. But it was not the hard, bright clapping of a parade. It was a deeper thing, slow and full, the sound a great many people make when they have all watched the same good thing happen and have no other way to say so. I thought that was the end of it. A wonder and a captain's mercy, and a boy returned to his grandfather, and the band would find its thread again and the parade would go on. That would have been enough. If it had ended there, I would have drawn it for the rest of my life and counted myself fortunate. But it did not end there, because the parade, you will remember, had been stopped, and the parade had a head, and the head of the parade was coming to see why. The king came up the court on his gray horse. I had seen the king at a distance every founding day for 19 years, a far figure in a far procession, a thing more like a flag than a man. I had never seen him close. He came up the open lane the crowd had made, walking the horse, and he was older than I had pictured him, with a tired, kind face, and he came to the edge of the open space where the guard stood bareheaded over the grandfather and the boy, and he stopped, and he looked. Now you must understand what the law of that moment was. A guard who has left his post stands before his king on the highest day of the year, in front of the whole nation, having broken the one oath the whole nation had gathered to see him keep. There is a way that is supposed to go. There are words for it. The king is meant to be displeased, or at the very kindest to be gracious and forgiving in a large, remote way, and the guard is meant to stand at attention and take whatever comes. That is the shape such a moment is supposed to have. The young guard came to attention. I saw him do it, saw the back go straight again and the bare head lift and the eyes go forward, the statue trying to reassemble itself out of the man, ready to take his punishment. And the king looked at him and looked at the boy in the grandfather's arms and looked back at the guard. And then the king of Marinstead did a thing that I will tell my children's children about if I am spared to know them. He got down off his horse. A king does not dismount in the middle of a parade. It is not done. There are men whose whole office is to hold the horse and help him down at the proper time and place, and this was neither. And yet he swung down off the gray by himself, an old man getting off a tall horse with the stiff care of an old man, and he handed the reins to no one because no one had expected it and there was no one ready, and he walked across the open cobbles to the young guard alone, and he stood in front of him. "Your name," the king said. I heard it. The court was that silent again. "Reed, your majesty," the young guard said. "Lance Corporal Thomas Reed of the gate." His voice did not shake. I marked that. It did not shake. "There, now you have his name in the place where I came to have it. Thomas Reed. Write it small somewhere if you are the writing kind, for it is a name worth keeping." "You left your post, Lance Corporal Reed," the king said. "I did, your majesty." No excuse, no explanation. He did not say the boy was dying, though the boy had been dying. He did not plead. He stood at attention with his bare head up and said the true thing in 4 words and waited. The king was quiet for a moment. Then he reached out and he put his hand, his bare old hand, on the young guard's shoulder, the same shoulder the captain's hand had rested on, and he said, in a voice that was meant to carry, that he made carry, so that the court would hear it and so that I can give it to you now." "There is a post," the king said, "that comes before this gate and before this palace and before me and before the oath you swore to all three. It is the oldest post in my kingdom and the oldest post in the world. It is the post a man takes when a child cannot breathe and he is the only one near enough to help. You did not leave your post today, Lance Corporal. You found the one that mattered more." He paused. "And you held it, as I would expect of any man of my household, as I would expect of you." I have turned those words over 1,000 times. I am not a clever man, and I will not pretend to have understood all of what was in them. But I have come to think that the king was saying a thing that the young guard had already known in his body 2 seconds before he came off the stone, that the discipline was never about the standing still. The standing still was only the training for it. The real thing, the thing all that holding was for, was to be a man so completely in command of himself that when the one moment came, the moment that asked everything, he would be ready and steady and would not waste it. A man who cannot hold still cannot be trusted to move well. That is what I think the king meant. Reed had spent every motionless hour of his service learning how to be exactly that calm, so that on the day a small gray-blue face needed the calmest man in the kingdom would have won, on a worn pale stone, 10 feet away. The king stepped back. He did not embrace the guard or make a show of it. He was an old man and a king, and he kept the dignity of both. But before he turned to his horse, he looked once more at the boy, who had stopped crying now and was watching all of this over his grandfather's shoulder with the enormous solemn eyes of a child who knows that something large has happened around him and does not yet have the words for it. And the king smiled at the boy. And the boy, after a moment, smiled back. A small, wet, uncertain smile, and the whole court saw it. And that was when the sound finally came up, not clapping now, but a great rolling cheer. The kind that starts in the chest before it reaches the throat, rolling down the length of the lantern court and back, on and on, while the king climbed stiffly back onto his gray and the captain helped Lance Corporal Reed find his place. And the band, somewhere, picked up its thread again, ragged at first and then strong. They did not put Reed back on the stone that day. The captain took him in. A man does not stand a ceremonial post with the shake still in his hands, however steady his voice was, and there is no shame in that. The shake comes after always when the work is done and the body remembers to be afraid on its own behalf. But before they took him in, while the parade was reassembling itself around them, the grandfather got up off the cobbles with the boy on his hip and he went to the young guard. And the two men stood facing each other, the thin old man and the young soldier, and the old man tried to speak and could not, and Reed, I was close. I heard it. Reed bent down to the level of the boy and said, very simply, "You did well. You breathed when I asked you to. That was the brave thing and you did it." And the boy, who had not said a word through all of it, reached out one small hand and laid it flat on the breast of that dark coat, over the place where a man's heart is, and held it there a moment, the way Reed had laid his own hand on the boy's chest, and then drew it back. And that was all. There was nothing more to say, and they both knew it, and the old man carried the boy away into the crowd, and I lost them. I went back to my square of cobblestone the next morning, before the sun was properly over the rooftops, and I set up my stool and laid my board across my knees, and there was a guard at the saint's gate, on the right-hand side, standing on the worn pale stone. It was not Reed. It was another young man, as still as Reed had been, as still as all of them are, looking through the early tourists at something past the far wall that none of them could see. And I found that I could not draw him. For 19 years I had drawn that stillness, or tried to, thinking it was the thing itself, the whole of the man. Now I knew it was not. Now I knew that what I had been drawing all along was only the held bow, and that the held bow means nothing, is only a curved stick and a tight string, until the moment the arrow is loosed, and that you cannot draw that moment because it does not live in the stillness and it does not live in the motion. It lives in the place between them, in the 2 seconds when a man decides. I had spent my life drawing the wrong thing. I had been drawing the silence and missing the song. So I did not draw the guard that morning nor the next. I sat with my charcoal in my hand and my clean board on my knees, and I looked at the man on the stone, and I thought about what was under it, about how every one of them, every silent statue at every gate I had ever sketched, was a man holding himself in readiness for a moment he hoped would never come and would not flinch from if it did. I had thought their discipline was a kind of emptiness. It was the opposite of emptiness. It was the fullest thing I have ever stood near. A man so packed with held strength that, when the one true call came, he could spend all of it at once, cleanly, on a child, and have it be enough. I am an old man, and I will not draw forever. My hands are not what they were, and the charcoal slips. But I have one drawing left in me that I mean to get right before I am done, and it is not of a guard standing still, and it is not of a guard in motion either. It is of 2 seconds. It is of a young man on a worn, pale stone with his eyes coming down out of the far distance to land on a small blue hood in the crush, and weighing the oath against the child and deciding. If I can draw those 2 seconds, I will have drawn the truest thing I ever saw, and I will have understood at last what I was looking at all those years from my stool at the edge of the lantern court. A statue does not love you, a statue cannot. But a man who has trained himself so hard and so long that he can stand like a statue, that man is not less than the rest of us. He is more. He has put all his motion into a held place where it waits, terribly patient for the day it is needed. And on the day it is needed, he does not hesitate, because the hesitating is the part he burned away in all those motionless hours. He simply comes off the stone. That is what the uniform guards, not the gate, not the palace, not even the king in the end. It guards the moment, the one that comes without warning out of the middle of a glad and ordinary day, and it keeps a man ready for it and steady in it and gentle after it. I did not know that for 19 years. A 6-year-old boy in a blue coat taught it to me, without ever saying a word, with one small hand laid flat over a soldier's heart. I hope he grows up well. I hope someone tells him when he is old enough to keep it, what he was part of on that founding day. And I hope, when he is a man, that he learns the thing his rescuer knew, that the truest strength in this world is not the strength that cannot be moved, but the strength that knows the single moment it must move and saves itself, whole and ready for that. Lance Corporal Thomas Reed knew it. He stood still for it for years. And then, when it asked him, he gave all of it at once, and it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. So I did not draw the guard that morning nor the next. I sat with my charcoal in my hand and my clean board on my knees, and I looked at the man on the stone, and I thought about what was under it, about how every one of them, every silent statue at every gate I had ever sketched, was a man holding himself in readiness for a moment he hoped would never come and would not flinch from if it did. I had thought their discipline was a kind of emptiness. It was the opposite of emptiness. It was the fullest thing I have ever stood near. A man so packed with held strength that, when the one true call came, he could spend all of it at once, cleanly, on a child, and have it be enough. I am an old man, and I will not draw forever. My hands are not what they were, and the charcoal slips. But I have one drawing left in me that I mean to get right before I am done, and it is not of a guard standing still, and it is not of a guard in motion either. It is of 2 seconds. It is of a young man on a worn, pale stone with his eyes coming down out of the far distance to land on a small blue hood in the crush, and weighing the oath against the child and deciding. If I can draw those 2 seconds, I will have drawn the truest thing I ever saw, and I will have understood at last what I was looking at all those years from my stool at the edge of the lantern court. A statue does not love you, a statue cannot. But a man who has trained himself so hard and so long that he can stand like a statue, that man is not less than the rest of us. He is more. He has put all his motion into a held place where it waits, terribly patient for the day it is needed. And on the day it is needed, he does not hesitate, because the hesitating is the part he burned away in all those motionless hours. He simply comes off the stone. That is what the uniform guards, not the gate, not the palace, not even the king in the end. It guards the moment, the one that comes without warning out of the middle of a glad and ordinary day, and it keeps a man ready for it and steady in it and gentle after it. I did not know that for 19 years. A 6-year-old boy in a blue coat taught it to me, without ever saying a word, with one small hand laid flat over a soldier's heart. I hope he grows up well. I hope someone tells him when he is old enough to keep it, what he was part of on that founding day. And I hope when he is a man that he learns the thing his rescuer knew, that the truest strength in this world is not the strength that cannot be moved, but the strength that knows the single moment it must move and saves itself, whole and ready for that. Lance Corporal Thomas Reed knew it. He stood still for it for years. And then when it asked him, he gave all of it at once, and it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.